Welcome, fearless viewers, to another chilling tale from our realm of horror. Tonight, we delve into the darkest corners of the human psyche, where shadows lurk and fear reigns supreme. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel and join our growing community of horror enthusiasts. Help us reach our next milestone of 1,100 subscribers, as we continue to uncover spine-tingling stories that will haunt your dreams. Now, brace yourself, as the journey into the unknown begins. I was just a regular 29-year-old girl living my life and trying to make a difference as a nurse. Working at the hospital was both exciting and challenging. One day, a patient named Edward Dawson came in with a broken leg. From the moment I met him, something about him felt really off. His intense gaze made my skin crawl. Usually, we get some pretty weird patients, but this one was completely different. The vibes were all off with him, and it made me super uncomfortable. He stayed in the hospital for a few days, because we needed to perform extra surgery on his leg. As time went on, it felt like he was becoming weirdly fixated on me. He would constantly ask me questions I was not okay with, and even made extremely inappropriate comments, for which he got yelled at by other nursing staff. About a month after his release, I never saw him again and was happy because he was by far the weirdest patient I've had in my years of working as a nurse. One day, as I was preparing medication at the nurse's station, I heard a whisper from the right side of me, "You have such beautiful eyes, Emily. I can see so much in them." I froze and looked over. Guess who it was? Edward. I was shocked. I looked at him and asked him how he had become a nurse so fast. "I just finished nursing school," he said, "and I just so happened to get placed here." Crazy, right? He laughed as if this was all one funny joke we shared. From that moment on, Edward seemed to be following me everywhere. He would show up unexpectedly in the corridors or outside the hospital, always watching me. While I was doing simple tasks, he somehow got a hold of my number and started sending me text messages filled with disturbingly intimate details about my personal life. I was terrified because I didn't know how he knew all this information, but I assumed one of my coworkers was telling him everything about me. So, I tried to brush it off. One evening, as I left the hospital after a long shift, I noticed a dark figure standing across the street. My heart skipped a beat when I realized it was Edward. He was just standing there, watching me, and he didn't move. I quickened my pace, trying not to make eye contact, and got in my car. After this, the text messages from Edward became more frequent and way more disturbing. He would reference moments from my day, things he couldn't possibly know unless he had been following me. At this point, it really started to freak me out, and I didn't want to be alone at night. One night, I finally got a chance to let loose and have some fun with my friends. We went to a local hangout spot, laughing and enjoying each other's company. It was a much-needed break from the stress of work. As the night went on, my phone buzzed with a notification. I looked at it, and my heart sank. It was a message from my home security system's Ring camera showing activity at my house. My friends noticed the change in my expression and asked me what was wrong. "It's Edward, guys," I muttered, my voice trembling. My security camera caught him walking around my house in the middle of the night. My friends were now also super freaked out. "Emily, this is serious," Lisa exclaimed. "You have to call the cops now, and we should get somewhere that's not in public." We left immediately and went to Lisa's house, the only one of us in the group that Edward had never talked to because she doesn't work at the hospital with us. We got back to her house and sat down to watch him over the Ring camera as we called the police. He was trying to break in. He tried everything, lifting the window, climbing on my roof, trying to break down the door. The police told me they would prioritize my safety first after they showed up at Lisa's house. As we waited for them to arrive, my friends stayed by my side, providing comfort and support. They arrested Edward almost immediately when they got to my house. Weeks after this happened, they started an investigation and found out he wasn't even a real doctor. He was impersonating one and worked there for weeks. I could barely sleep after knowing I had a stalker for months and had no idea that all the information he got was from my medical records that he had secretly grabbed while at the hospital. Still, to this day, I think about it from time to time, but I haven't heard a single thing about him or his name since. I'm going to tell you the bone-chilling story of my encounter with a super creepy patient in the hospital ward. I've always been drawn to the medical field because I've always done well caring for others. I'm a 23-year-old woman who works at my local hospital on night shifts. One night, I had to go to room 307, which was a single bedroom. Lying in the bed was Mr. Jacobson, an elderly patient in his late 80s who was terminally ill and blind in both eyes. He was a wise person who was perfectly okay with nearing the end of his journey. We developed a friendly liking for each other, but I tried not to get too closely attached to patients who were not going to be here for much longer, as it really did a number on my mental health. As I approached his bedside, Mr. Jacobson turned his head towards me. His clouded eyes looked at me, his voice raspy as he spoke. "The nurse has arrived. I've been expecting you, my dear." I smiled back and said, "Good evening, Mr. Jacobson. How are you feeling today?" He chuckled softly. His laugh was always comforting as it reminded me that things would be okay in the long run of life. "Feeling? Oh, my dear, I am but a mere vessel drifting between realms. Time doesn't hold much meaning for me now," he said. It was the strangest thing that I'd ever heard him say since my time nursing him. I knew him to be poetic and deep, but this was extremely strange behavior for him. I tried my best to decipher what he meant, but nothing made sense. Confused and super creeped out, I asked, "What do you mean, Mr. Jacobson?" "Like a butterfly, you will too awaken in your own time very soon, my love." Those words hit me hard. They were exactly what my late grandmother used to say, a reminder that change and growth come at their own pace. How did Mr. Jacobson know this? I began to tear up from the intense emotions I was feeling. I was scared and confused. I couldn't hold back my curiosity any longer. My voice trembling, I asked, How did you know about that phrase?" "It's something that only my grandmother used to say." Mr. Jacobson's tired eyes met mine, and a look of sadness appeared on his face. "Some connections go beyond life." We both cried together, holding on to that moment. I didn't want to understand everything that had happened, but it made me feel something deep inside. Mr. Jacobson's words about my grandmother were like a secret, something I couldn't explain, but held on to dearly. As time passed, I kept those words close to my heart. They brought me comfort when I felt lost or unsure. I think that my grandmother's love extended beyond her passing, giving me strength and hope. Now, standing here today, I carry the wisdom of those connected voices. I embrace the mystery and the things I can't fully understand. Mr. Jacobson's encounter showed me that there are connections that go beyond time and space, and they give us a sense of purpose and guidance. So I continue on my journey with newfound strength and an open mind. The mysteries of life unfold before me like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. This happened back in the 1980s. As a nurse working at a mental hospital, I encountered many patients who were a bit out of it. But there was always one patient who stood out, Jacob. He was straight up off his rocker. Imagine a guy who made Jack Nicholson's character in The Shining look like Mary Poppins. Jacob had a twisted fascination with causing harm. He was really disturbing, and I did not enjoy going into his room when it was my job to help him. One night, I was doing the rounds. At nighttime, our patients needed sleep, so we shut off all the lights except for a few. The entire hallway was blacked out, with the only source of light being my work pen, which had a light button on it so I could flash down the hallway to see. I went down to Jacob's room to make sure he was in bed and sleeping. But as I approached Ward 13, the door was wide open. I entered the room with the small light from my pen. Everything was a mess inside. Furniture was overturned, sheets were torn, and there were what I thought to be bloodstains on the walls. It seemed like a storm of madness had swept through. What made it even scarier was that Jacob was considered dangerous, so we had restrained him with strong restraints on his arms and legs. Yet somehow, he managed to break out from these, which was almost impossible. With a heavy feeling in the air, I cautiously moved towards the door that led to the downstairs storage area, a place only staff were allowed into. We searched every spot for him, and this was the last area left. Suddenly, I saw a figure darting behind some shelves. I didn't know what was about to happen next, but I was ready to fight this lunatic if he attacked me. Carefully, I made my way through the narrow aisles, trying to find Jacob. It was pitch black and silent, with the only source of light from my pen. Out of the corner, I saw Jacob crouched beside an old locker. He held a shiny scalpel in his hand and was smiling. Frozen with fear, I watched as he stood up, a sickening smile on his face. He started walking towards me, the scalpel in one hand. He swung the scalpel at me, narrowly missing. I dodged and fought back. In the middle of this fight, as Jacob swung the sharp tool, another nurse came running. She had a syringe filled with strong medicine and injected it into Jacob's back, sedating him. Almost right away, the medicine started working, and Jacob collapsed and passed out. Security arrived soon after and helped us completely restrain Jacob, making sure that he wouldn't harm anyone else. After this scary incident, the hospital decided to move Jacob to a different mental health facility that could provide more intensive care. They realized how serious his condition was and wanted him to get the specialized treatment that he needed. Since then, I've never met a crazier patient than him. I worked at a hospital in the city near where I grew up. I worked the second shift, which was 2:30 p.m. until 11 p.m. One night after work, a few of my friends and I went to a popular bar not far from the hospital. We sat around, drank a few beers, and had a good time. Soon, it was getting late, and I needed to get home. The street the bar was on was a one-way, so I had to go about a block, turn left, go a block over, then take another left, which put me on another one-way but in the direction towards the freeway. As I was driving, I came up to a red light, so I stopped and waited. It's important to know that I was driving a full-size GMC pickup with a topper on the bed. The truck was my late father's, which had an important attachment to me. The only thing I didn't like was how it didn't have AC, so I drove with the window partially down, if not completely down. While I was waiting, this dirty-looking woman popped up and asked if I wanted to party. To say the woman was disgusting odor-wise would be an understatement. I replied, no. She then jumped on the sideboard and asked why not, then lifted her dirty shirt, exposing herself. I locked the door with my elbow and asked her to get off my truck, praying for the light to change. She kept talking, and I noticed she was trying to see over my truck topper. I glanced over to the passenger side mirror and saw a young man trying to walk quickly but hunched down. I didn't know what these two had in mind, but I knew it wasn't good. I told the girl to get off my truck once again, and when she didn't, I gently shoved her shoulder. She then grabbed the side mirror to stay attached to it. I hit the gas as I saw the light change, and the guy stood up and started running. The girl held on for a few seconds to my truck before finally letting go. I made it to the next light, which was red, but it gave me time to roll up my window. I looked back at the two pointing at me, and I guess arguing about the woman keeping me distracted enough. I made it home without any further issues, but I never ventured into that part of the city again. This took place in the early 90s. I was a male X-ray tech at a large multi-campus hospital, working evenings. I loved my job and had some great coworkers, one of whom was my best friend. One day, I got paged for a phone call. I picked up the phone and said, "This is Luke." There was a slight pause, then I heard a female voice saying she really appreciated how kind I was the other night. It caught me off guard, but I said thank you and asked who I was talking to. After another pause, she said, "All in due time," then hung up. I had no idea who it was and thought my friend was probably pranking me. I didn't say anything to anyone that night, figuring whoever was pulling my leg would trip up and say something. I went home and forgot about it. Then, a couple of days later, I got paged again. Once again, the same person asked me if I was thinking about her. I said I wasn't and that I was too busy for games, then hung up. Later that night, when I left work, I noticed a note on my truck that said I made a huge mistake disrespecting her and I would regret it. I tossed the note and went home. Later that night, around 2 a.m., my phone rang. I heard the same voice saying I would get one more chance, then she hung up. The next day, I confronted my friend and told him the joke wasn't funny and to quit calling me. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. I told him everything and watched to see if he grinned or chuckled, but he didn't. A couple more days passed and I honestly forgot about it. It was my day off, and I needed to run some errands, so I went to the mall. I was hungry, so I got something to eat at the food court, and that's when I noticed a woman sitting and staring at me. I felt uneasy, got up, tossed my food wrappers, and left. I walked around looking to see if she was following me, and to my shock, she was. I kept walking aimlessly, and she stayed on my trail. I ducked into a store with 2 floors and was able to lose her. I was rattled but didn't have a clue who this woman was. Later that night, I was laying in bed, unable to sleep, thinking about her nonstop. Around 2 a.m., the phone rang, and it scared the crap out of me. I answered it and told her to stop bothering me, or I would go to the police. The phone clicked and went silent. About an hour later, I heard something outside my house. I got up and went through the house, looking out all the doors and windows. Finally, I saw a shadow of a person standing near my truck. I called 911 and told the operator what was going on. They sent a deputy sheriff to my house. I stood by the window, hoping they would get there quickly before whoever it was left. Thankfully, they did, and the lady was still there. She was taken into custody. The deputy told me she seemed to be on some type of drug and had a note with her about how disrespected I made her feel. She said all she was going to do was put it on my truck. She also had a fixed blade knife on her, but wouldn't say what her intentions were with it. They said they were going to take her to the hospital to get her checked out and suggested I get a restraining order. I never knew what happened to her and never saw her again, thankfully.